Joining us right now is Real Agriculture's Kelvin Heppner, who's going to explain everything that how should we view all of this, because there's a lot of angles. Kelvin, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm a little tired. Otherwise, I'm doing well here, Sean. Yeah, there are a lot of different angles. To me, these results send a lot of different messages. There's conflicting messages coming out of what we're seeing in terms of I know some of these seat count totals aren't completely firmed up, but the Liberals right now at leading in 168 seats, just short, four short of the 172 required for a majority. Conservatives at 144, Bloc 23, NDP down to 7. So I think there's a bit of a bittersweet flavor to these results for all four of those major parties.
Bloc underperforms, NDP underperforms, Polyev
But they both
loses.
carry the balance of power. But they
Right,
both
they carry the
both
balance. Yeah, so
carry
and
the
we're gonna
balance
have
of
to see
power.
how at the time of us recording this, we don't know how there's like upwards of like 20 or 30 ridings that are still really close and still trying to figure it out. Um, but it seems like it's a kind of a lock, like majority, or sorry, a minority is the likely scenario at this point.
Yeah, it looks like, well, you'd only need four seats to change to give the Liberals a majority. But right now it's looking like they have a minority. The Bloc and both the NDP will be likely to be dance partners to get the Liberals over that 172 mark to carry a majority in the House of Commons. So, yeah, for the Liberals, I think huge popular vote that we haven't seen for any party since the 80s. I went back into some of the stats from the past, and we haven't seen a popular vote at 43.5% as of right now. We haven't seen it that high since 1984, I believe it was. We also, but at the same time, the Liberals did not perform as well as some of the seat projections in the last couple of weeks. So, and of course, they'll be disappointed that they didn't actually achieve or don't appear to have achieved a majority. The Conservatives actually saw a greater popular vote than they have when they won elections, Sean, under the Harper government, even greater than the Trudeau Liberals the last in 2015, for example. It's actually the highest popular vote percentage of any party with the word conservative in the name in decades, also going back to the 80s. So, and the Conservatives won 20 more, something around 20 more seats, I believe, than what they had prior to the election, taking seats from the Liberals and the NDP. So right there, that's a pretty good, positive message. But then you, of course, can turn it on its head and say they lost an election where they were leading in the polls by more than 20% less than 3 months prior to voting day. And their leader, Pierre Poilievre, has lost his seat in Carleton, and right now they're facing a very, very uncertain future with their leader not having a seat. He's not officially the head of the opposition now, as with this result, and so all kinds of uncertainty regarding the future of the Conservative Party and what their leadership situation is.
Well, if so a lot of people will look at we're gonna talk about the polls tomorrow. We got David Coletto from Abacus Data on the show tomorrow, but one thing the pollsters were very right about was basically Liberals had a 2 point advantage, and how much of the popular vote was incorrect, but that gap they lived it's just over 2% at this point. Basically the Canadian Shield is somewhat now of a separator in physically and politically. When I see conservative seats on Vancouver Island, that's a bit of a testament to how much BC moved towards the conservative camp. Boy, there's a lot of conservative seats: BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. Obviously, the northern regions of both Saskatchewan and Manitoba not going the Conservatives' way, which was expected, or as expected. So we got kind of this political separation now, physically and politically.
Yeah, if we didn't think we had it before, it's amplified even more. And some of this goes together hand in hand, along with that really high popular vote that both the Liberals and Conservatives saw. It's a result of the NDP collapse. And that's where in BC we saw a lot of NDP to Conservative seat switches, including Alistair McGregor, who for a long time was the NDP's lead on agriculture files, and we've had him on the show here, and many people who work with farm groups that visit Ottawa would have met with Alistair in the past. He lost his seat to a Conservative challenger in a three-way split where all three of the top parties received more than 25% of the vote in his riding. The Conservatives came out on top. So, yeah, like you said, conservative blue across much of the western half of the country, west of the Canadian Shield, parts of rural Ontario as well. There was some switching in the Maritimes in Atlantic Canada, although the Liberals probably recovered more in Atlantic Canada in the polls over the last 3 months than anywhere else in the country or many other parts of the country. And so, yeah, it the future of this discussion about the West's role in this country and whether it feels listened to is certainly something that Carney is going to have to deal with in what looks to be a very tenuous, potentially volatile situation in minority government.
Yeah, rural-urban divide feels kind of even starker now, doesn't it? Now, I haven't run the numbers on that, but it just when I look at the map, it really kind of feels that way.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, this is in a situation where Carney and the Liberals have been talking about making big changes. All political parties have been talking about the need to make bold, big actions to get the Canadian economy on a better path. Of course, to respond to the Trump administration and the different threats there. Uh, but if these results hold as they stand right now, where the Liberals are short of a majority, they will have very little cover or buffer from being brought down. And so I think, yeah, we're in for some interesting times, and I'm not sure that it gives the government the mandate to make these bold decisions. So at least they face the threat of being brought down at every corner. If the Conservatives block an NDP, I guess the block an NDP if they choose to not support them. So that's where we could be in for. This could actually be a quite a short-lived minority government in if you look at it from that sense. And I think that is probably going to be a factor in what happens with the Conservative leadership situation too. If Poilievre makes that argument, this government's not going to stand very long. Keep me as leader because I'm ready to go again, kind of thing.
Yeah, what happens to Pierre Poilievre, I think, is a big question on a lot of Canadians' mind. There's a lot of infighting between the Ontario Conservatives, the Ford camp, and the federal Conservatives. There is some factions, and they are not exactly. I don't want to. It's pretty understated how heated it is behind the scenes, and maybe out in the open more and more. That's going to be interesting.
Some of it came out in the open yesterday.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of it came out in the open yesterday as Jamil Javani, who actually worked in the Ford government in Ontario, is a Conservative candidate in Southern Ontario, and he accused Ford of interfering in the federal Conservatives campaign and getting in their way, and so yeah, some of that came to light. Sorry,
he called him a liberal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was pretty strongly worded in terms of pointing the finger at him and saying he was a hype man for the Carney Liberals, and so yeah, we'll see where that goes. And of course, a lot of Conservatives across the country feel that Doug Ford is more of a populist, not a conservative principled politician either. And so, but he's won several mandates in a row, and the federal Conservatives have failed to do that. And so, yeah, the future direction of the party is fascinating. And of course, the Conservative Party is a coalition of different political ideologies, and it's held for the last couple of decades, but there's certainly some risk here that it doesn't hold, depending on what happens with the leadership situation and the direction the party takes.
As I think back to early December, and I think about on this show and in some speeches, some of the things that I said were, that have proven to be like, boy, I read that wrong. And the greatest of political analysts and pundits and followers got like this reversal for Carney is of historic proportions. As you talked about, a 20-point lead, some of it self-inflicted, most of it because of some of the influence of President Trump, the collapse of the NDP. There's a lot of factors here. But this is 4 months of politics, Kelvin, that we're going to be talking about in Canada for a long time.
Yeah, it's the Trump factor. A lot of people are referring to that, but it's also the fact that Justin Trudeau was pushed off the stage.
That's another variable. Sorry. Yes, thank you.
So many people. Well, no, I'm not. I'm just adding to the discussion here because I think that's one of the things that conservatives are certainly going to be questioning if they do a debrief in the coming weeks on this whole situation. Maybe they shouldn't have gone so hard after Trudeau, spending big spending big advertising dollars attacking him and getting him pushed out the door. It certainly, the results likely would have been different if it had been Poilievre versus Trudeau atop the ballot last night.
Yeah, reversal from what we saw in the U.S. election, where Trump pushed on Biden, really slaughtered him in that debate. Biden is forced out, but at the end of the day, Trump still won. In this situation, it was a different outcome where you pushed really hard. Trudeau is, as Rosie Barton said last night, knifed, but that was the word that she used, knifed by Chrystia Freeland. And look at this epic turnaround. I'll admit when we're right and claim when we're, knowing it when we're wrong. I can remember asking the Real Ag Issues panel several times, why would Carney want this job? Well, I guess we found out.
Well, and you said in speeches in December, Shaun, I remember talking to a university class at University of Manitoba in late January and saying that this scenario wouldn't happen, that there's no way this swing in the polls would happen. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things that we didn't expect to have happen here. And yeah, it's also another big fascinating part of this to me is how sure the leader of the Liberal Party has changed, but the cabinet members are largely all the same behind him. You look at the top staff, the advisors to Mark Carney, it's Jerry Butts, Andrew Bevin, Tom Pitfield. These are guys that were around from day one with Trudeau and were major advisors to Prime Minister Trudeau and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. And here they are working with Carney, and Canadians have felt this is enough of a change, or at least they felt that the circumstances with a different administration south of the border warranted, I guess, giving the Liberals a fourth consecutive mandate, which, again, in Canadian political history, not many parties get the fourth one. There's been quite a few instances of three, but like a good TV show, the seasons after once you get to seasons 9, 10, 11, things start to peter out usually, and the Liberals have countered that trend this week.
Yeah, I was thinking about this morning. A lot of times in Canadian politics, people say, in comparison to the U.S., is that, the U.S. politics is about the leader, right? You vote for the leader. And in Canada, we vote for the party. Do we? Because the change in leadership flipped this, like American style almost. And it kind of, like, you look at the popular vote, and the NDP and the Bloc and where their percentages are, which were like, so the Greens were 1.2, NDP was 6.3, and the Bloc was 6.4. Two-party race. It almost felt like this feels more two-party than I can remember in like a long time.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of that NDP support coalesced around the Liberals, and even the Bloc support went to the Liberals as, again, and I think a lot of this being driven by the Trump factor, and also people on the left side of the spectrum wanting to not have Poilievre be Canada's prime minister. And so, yeah, I think our attention spans these days, Shaun, are so short that the leader is a big part of the party brand, and people get to know the leader. They don't have time to actually get to know, and even then, how well do we really know Mark Carney? We don't know him that well, and especially this version of Mark Carney that repeals the carbon tax versus the Mark Carney that wrote the book about the importance of moving to net zero and all of those types of things, and the one who formed the Net Zero Banking Alliance. And it'll be interesting to see whether the Liberals. So I guess in some ways I'm saying a small C conservative, not somebody that's partisan to the Conservative Party of Canada, should be relatively pleased with what the Conservative Party itself accomplished here in terms of moving the political discourse in Canada, or at least this is a silver lining. The political discourse in Canada moved to the right, and with a focus on economic issues, with a focus on ending the carbon tax, repealing the capital gains tax changes, that type of thing. Those are small C conservative wins, and Carney has moved the Liberal Party in that direction. But does he keep it down that trajectory based on his past and based on all the people around him in their past? Stephen Guilbeault, for example, longtime environment minister, reelected last night handily in his Quebec riding. And so, is this is this a different Liberal Party than we saw for the last decade, or is this quickly going to revert to more of the same? That's a big question, I think, to be determined in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, now Carney's got to come through. How does he deal? Canadians clearly said, "Hey, we think that Prime Minister Carney would be better in dealing with the trade issues or the political issues with President Trump of the United States." So rubber hits the road now on that. Still think, depending on how long this government's in power, which could be short or it could be the full term, is national unity. I think that may be a bigger challenge for him than the Trump issue. The Trump issue is more, in some ways, I could argue, a little bit more show business, whereas the national unity one is a real crisis he may have to actually deal with. What do you think before we wrap up?
Yeah, exactly. Especially with a separatist party in the Bloc Québécois holding the balance of power.
Yeah.
That's one thing. At points last night, it looked like the Bloc was going to be the only dance partner for the Liberals to get them to majority. The NDP now, with the Liberals getting up to 168 seats, the NDP could put them over the top too. So it's a matter of whether the Liberals and NDP, those few Liberal members, can work together, or whether the Liberals have to work with the Bloc. And that's where the Bloc will always stand up for Quebec's interests over the rest of the country. And I think that's where we get into some heavy unity discussions here in the coming months. Whether it's years, probably more likely months.
And NDP without a leader. Do the Liberals try to coax those a few of those NDP seats across the aisle? That's a possibility to watch out for, as well. Hey, Kelvin, thanks a lot. We'll see you on Friday.
Thanks, Shaun.